You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. I'm John Irvine, and welcome to Light in the D. So I'm gonna just kind of open this up and say I'm really excited to have radio personality Mark Gilman
former radio
on the second episode of Light in the D. Thank you. For former. So you got I've known you for a while, so I'm gonna ask you to kind of share with the audience, give a little bit background of who you are and what you do.
Now or in the past?
In the past and now, yeah. Kind of let's get to just give your background, because
I always wanted to be in radio for some reason, and I think it was a way for me to break out of my shell. I was a pretty shy kid, and I landed an afternoon rock show on a station in Stowe, Vermont, and all my buddies at school used to get off of school at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would just like call the show the whole time. I was like Mr. Popular. Hey, can you play this? Can you play that? And they always used to try and come up with stuff that I didn't have in the repertoire. So it was WMTF. We called it Mountain Funk. And it was a station that maybe 20 people listened to it. It was at a private school that I didn't even attend, and
that's at least 20 more people that are listening to this. So that's
there you go. So and then I went in the military, and I was in the Navy, and I was a journalist. And what was really funny was that I went to journalism school in the military is broken into two halves. One is print and public affairs, and the other is broadcast. You had to pass a voice test to get in the broadcast. And I flunked my voice test because my Boston accent was so bad that there was no way that I was ever going to be on the radio anywhere outside the 20-mile radius outside of Boston.
You clearly lost it.
Well, that inspired me. So I was in California, and I tried to change my voice into a Californian. And I've actually had people say, it's like, oh, you must be from California. But I still have problems with certain letters. And, like, I worked in Washington for years, and you have to say Congress a lot. And Congress. that's a really hard word for me, because I always want to say Congress,
Congress,
Congress, because the O's turn into A's in Boston. And, it's like, I was talking to somebody this morning about the Boston accent, and the old joke about, what is a khaki? And he says, well, they're pants. No, they hold up car keys. That's what these are. These are khakis. It's khaki.
Yeah.
But it's just my whole family's from Boston and the area, and they all live in New Hampshire now. They've emigrated to escape taxes. But so I just kind of floated around. I was doing radio news, and after I got in the military, I got a job at a newspaper in New Hampshire, and I was doing radio in the morning and the newspaper in the afternoon. And I was the news director I had taken over. You never want to take over for a legend. And in New Hampshire, there's a guy named Fritz Weatherby. You couldn't ask for a more English name than Fritz Weatherby. And he is still on New Hampshire public television doing New Hampshire history things or whatever. But he was a legend. I replaced him, and he actually groomed me to take his place in the news, because Fritz would talk like this, and he would give the news like this, and it's just like he still talks like that. And, he was a friend of the family. My stepmother called in a favor, got me a job at the radio station, so then I went to Tucson, and I was in Tucson. I chased a girl to Tucson, and I got a job at it was the funniest story, because I walked in an Associated Press office, and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. And I came here without a job. And he says, good luck with that. He takes my resume, throws it on the desk. He says, we haven't hired anybody in 8 years. So I'm like, okay. So I got a call the next day from this same guy who said, you better go down to KTUC downtown. It's a CBS affiliate. It's an all news station. Talk to the general manager, and they just fired their news director. So they hired me on the spot. So I ended up being news director of this radio station in Tucson. I was there for a year and a half, and then the ABC affiliate across town, KNST, which was the flagship for the University of Arizona sports, which I always wanted to be on and do that kind of stuff. They hired me. They tried to steal me from KTUC, and I said, I'll go on one condition: you give me a talk show. So they gave me the 2 to 4 in the afternoon slot, and that's kind of started my talk show stuff. I was 28 years old. I was the youngest talk show host in Arizona, and I was a total jerk and full of myself. And I remember getting called into the general manager's office one time, and he said, "You know what, Mark?" He says, "Our ratings have never been better. Your show is sold out. I couldn't be more pleased with the way things are going. But I will tell you, and as soon as the ratings go down, you are out on your butt in about 10 seconds. You are a pain in the bleep to deal with." And it's like, okay, I got it. So I kind of learned a little bit through that experience. And then this is how I got into Christian radio. So I got this friend of mine in town in Tucson who said, "Hey, there's a station in Albuquerque that it's a Christian rock station. It's a nonprofit. It's kind of like a broadcast school and all this stuff. And I'd really like you to go check it out." So he flies me to Albuquerque. I walk in this place. It's a dump. People have punched holes in the walls. I mean, this place was just a toilet. And I'm like, I said, I can't get out of it. It was just taken over by a guy named Randy Rich, who used to play football for the Denver Broncos. Randy Rich.
I love these names. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a defensive back he's a defensive back for the Denver Broncos.
Okay.
And he tried to talk me into it, and I'm like, there's no way in heck I am going to work here. And I've heard Christian radio, and most Christian radio is terrible, and I don't want to ruin my career by going into Christian radio. So I get on a plane and I fly back to Albuquerque, and halfway back back from Albuquerque back to Tucson, halfway back, it's like guy just grabbed me like this and said, "You're going to Albuquerque." And I ended up going to Albuquerque. I was there for a few years and ended up running a Christian radio station, a Christian record company in Austin, Texas after that. And I also did a program to a Christian station in Austin. And then I went to Virginia Beach, and I got a job as a news anchor for the Christian Broadcasting Network. And I used to do the night shift. And so the West Coast drive time is what I did. So I was the only one in the building. I had no friends. I didn't know anybody there. I was there.
Can I ask, well, like, what was your Christian background? How did your faith? Where did you come to faith, and how did that lead into you wanting to do Christian radio?
I was a product of missionary dating. I was in my last year of the military. I met a woman in Washington State, and she told me she wouldn't go out with me unless I went to church with her. And even after we broke up, the funny story about that is that I got saved at a concert in the back of some Methodist church in Port Orchard, Washington.
Okay.
And I took part in the altar call. They're on a flatbed truck. They did an altar call. I went up there and I'm like, I'm looking for something. I just need something. So I go up to the front, and I'm like, okay, I'm here, and like a lot of altar calls, there's no follow up, so I didn't know what I'd done. I had no idea. So I'm in church the next day, and the pastor's giving this brimstone, which is interesting in a Methodist church, not to mess with Methodists, but it's usually not. Methodists usually aren't fire and brimstone. So he's giving this, "Are you going to hell? Are you going to heaven?" sermon. And he says, "With all heads bowed, if you don't know where you're going at the end of this life, raise your hand." Well, nobody told me when I did the altar call that I was going to heaven. So I raised my hand, with all eyes closed. I'm like this, And so at the end of this, he goes, "Okay, thank you for that. For the one young man who raised his hand, I'd like to see you in my office after the service." I flew out of that church so quickly. There was no way I was going to this guy's office. But eventually I started my long journey into Christendom, and I was always on secular radio for a long time, and I never really, as I said, I never really wanted to go to Christian radio because it's just most of the Christian radio I heard was so horrible, and I was just like, I don't want to do it, So what did you think was horrible about it? I thought a lot of it was pablum. I mean, people just spewing senseless, directives during the day. And if they weren't doing that, they're reading scripture with no context. And it was kind of like, I never liked Christian music much, which is probably why I went into talk, because I just, and when I was doing talk radio in Washington, D.C., I do remember that anytime we had a music artist on the show, I would refuse to talk about music. I would just talk about their life and stuff. And they actually like that.
They probably like that. Yeah.
I get sick of talking about their craft. So, it's just, it was fun. We had a good time. And, I was, they used to call me, when I was in DC, they called me the Christian Rush Limbaugh, which drove me out of my mind. I hated that. And I didn't want to be Rush Limbaugh, and although I listened to Rush all the time, and then after I started the show in Washington, I refused to listen to Rush because I didn't want to have to repeat anything he had said during the day and have people say, well, Rush said that today. No wonder you said that. So I stopped listening to Rush.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace. But this is my problem. So let me do my little Rush Limbaugh diatribe right now.
Okay.
Here's my problem with Rush Limbaugh. In the 90s, Rush Limbaugh was God to a lot of Christian conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't take the time to think, is Rush conservative, but does he know the Lord, or is he coming from biblical principles, or is he a mouthpiece for the Republican Party? Mm-hmm. And I have to say, there is no equation between the Republican Party and Christianity, except policy, and that's it. And I think in the whole moral majority and things that happened in the 90s with Rush, and Rush was fueled that whole movement, and it just frustrated me that the Christians were so devoted to Rush Limbaugh because they thought he was one of them. And then later on, when it came out that, Rush was human like the rest of us, he had addiction problems. He had been married a lot of times. There were other things that happened, and, like saying things on the air that I had forgotten some of the things that he had said until he died. And of course, all the networks that run. I know.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah. And it's all coming out. I'm like, oh yeah, he did.
But you know what? If you're on the air that day, all that for that amount of time every week, you're going to say something stupid. I've said so many things over the years. And I remember my wife used to ask me, she says, how much job security do you have in radio? I said, I am one sentence away from getting fired every day. There is no job security, especially
what
now.
You're saying is cancel culture has been around for a while.
It's been around for a long, long time. My cancel culture in Washington was the Washington Post. I got quoted on a regular basis in the Washington Post. Stupid stuff that I had said. And,
they loved you, I'm sure.
Some of it I backed, and some of it was just dumb. So, but that's kind of my radio career. After that, I went to Detroit. I went to MUZ, and by the time I get to Detroit, I was tired. I was just tired of doing radio. I was tired of every church service on Sunday being a personal appearance. Nobody would ever talk to Mark anymore. It was what I did on the show on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, and people coming up and saying, my girlfriend won't even come to your church because you're here. And I'm saying, well, that sounds like her problem. It's like, I'm not really. It's like, why would that be? Well, on Tuesday you said da 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 da, and I said, I forgot about that on Wednesday, so I can't respond to that, So, and my wife used to get so mad that every time we had dinner at the house, it became a diatribe and discussion about the talk show. It would just drive her nuts. Just like, can we have one dinner without talking about the show? And it was just, people used to call my pastor and he used to say, hey, can you tell Mark to knock off blah, 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 blah. And he said, I have zero control over Mark. I have no idea what he's going to say. I do not dictate what he's going to come down with. I can't define him. I can't do anything. It's Mark's show. I don't have any.
I can imagine you got to have a pretty thick skin.
I have developed one over the years, yes. But, you know what, though? When I was on the radio, I've been off radio 20 years, and it doesn't seem that long, but it has been. And I think if social media existed back 20 years ago, I would probably be a basket case. Yeah. Because I wouldn't have been able to handle the tweets and the direct messages and the text and we didn't have that. I mean, I remember when I was at WMUZ in Detroit, I was fighting management to have a blog. I was fighting them to have a website.
Yeah.
There was nothing. The station didn't even have a website. And I was like, can I have a website? No, you can't. I'm like, okay, fine. But it's just,
maybe you planted seeds. They have apps and everything now. So maybe you planted the seeds.
I know. It's just like, it's crazy. But back then it was like there was nothing. I mean, we just didn't. People were faxing me stuff, and that's how I got things. So,
but you were doing a podcast though.
I did a podcast on the Salem station in Detroit, Faith Talk 1500 and was it 92.3, I think it is, whatever.
Yeah.
And I did that. It's called Faith Busters, and we did that for 4 or 5 years, off and on.
Yeah.
And it was fun, but going in the studio and taping a bunch of shows on Saturday morning at 7:00 is.
Yeah. Well, you can do it like this now. You can do it right from your home. See,
I know. I wish, like, God bless COVID, because it's taught us to really live at home and kind of understand where the more scenic places are in our house. I just, true confession, John and I are actually in a Bible study together on Thursday mornings. Yep. And I usually in another room, which the other guys refer to as a police holding cell.
Yeah,
because that's what it looks like. Just for you, John, I actually moved out into the dining room.
Well, thank you.
It's better lit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I asked you the other day, and I appreciate, and I have great admiration for your background, and just, you've done this before, and I'm, here I am trying to launch this podcast videos thing, and, trying to bring my faith to the light and be a light in the darkness, if you will. And I asked you the question for some advice, and when you said, I think you said something along the lines of have a sense of humor, or try to have a sense of humor about it. Or that, and I think you made reference to the fact that most Christian radio and or podcasts are no fun. As my nephew would say.
Yeah, don't take yourself so seriously. People want to laugh. I still think laughter is the best way to get through. I was talking to a guy yesterday who is being moved to hospice on Friday, and we spent the whole time just laughing. And it's probably, I don't even know if I should mention this. One of the irreverent things we were talking about, because this guy was in Christian radio for a long time, we were discussing which Christian music artist he was going to meet up there and which ones he was not. So it was just a very irreverent way to make him laugh. I was just trying to make him laugh, and it worked, So,
yeah.
If you can make a guy going into hospice this week laugh, I think it's a good thing.
And I think we've talked about Christian music before. I think we have the same opinions about.
There's the people that are legit, and there's people who aren't. And I remember back, coming up in music, and I was at the Gospel Music Convention, the Devil Awards, every year, because the radio station would send me, and we would do a live show there and stuff. And the people who were legit were legit. I was very close to Rich Mullins, and he was probably one of the most irreverent people I've ever met in my life. And if you've ever seen the movie Ragamuffin, you'll know that he struggled his whole life, but just with his faith and everything else. And, he had an alcoholism problem. He had, he was just an amazing guy, but I liked him because he was real, and he never tried to be something that he wasn't.
Yeah.
He never put gel in his hair. He never wore some crazy suit on stage. And I'll never forget his last appearance in Detroit. He was at Northridge Church, and he got almost booed off the stage. This is 2 weeks before he died. He almost got booed off the stage because at this time, this was like 1998, and there was a big movement afoot to bring prayer back into the schools again. There was a big debate again. Every 20 years we talk about it. Mm-hmm. They wanted to put prayer back in the schools again. And he says, yeah, that's a great idea. So for you parents who are abdicating your responsibility at home to pray with your kids, let's let teachers who don't know the Lord, let's let them lead your kids in prayer. Yeah. So his whole point was, if you're fighting for this, that means you don't want to have that responsibility at home.
Right.
He got booed off the stage. It was unbelievable. And then he dies 2 weeks later, and he's a martyr.
Yeah.
He went through the Keith Green experience, if everyone remembers Keith Green. And Keith Green was also maligned when he was alive. And then when he died, he was a prophet. It's just kind of how the Christian, they shoot their wounded, then they elevate them.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. But you get to see the Christian musicians over the years who were legit and had real life. I will say this, the one person I mentioned, two people. One is Amy Grant, who is as real as you want to get. Literally one of the nicest people you ever want to meet in your life. The other one is Stephen Curtis Chapman, who I met Stephen Curtis Chapman when he was a young kid putting out a single. He just had one single with a little black and white cover. It was a 45. And he was like homespun from Paducah, Kentucky. He had no idea what it was like to be in a big time radio station and do all this stuff. And then 30 years later, he is still the same guy and just a sweetheart of a guy. But there are so few people like them that it's kind of frustrating. You know, it's just there were a lot of scandals in Christian music, like we have in Christian ministry today. There were people having affairs while they were on the road. There's all sorts of stuff happen. And you know, can you imagine if we had the media today that we have today? Oh yeah, how big these scandals would be.
I don't know. Are you familiar with John Cooper, the band, the metal band Skillet?
Yep.
Yeah. I listened to his podcast, Cooper Stuff, and he talks about that. I read it. He just wrote a book, and he talks about that too. He was shocked, you know, going on the road with supposed Christian bands and saying how he calls it out. They're not living their lives for Christ. There are a lot of them, you know. So he's the real deal. He's the real deal.
It's difficult though when you're around it.
Sure.
Then you have to. I get to the point where I just didn't want to talk to people who, in that genre, who weren't living their real life. I mean, I like the people who are a little on the edge, but very on fire for their faith. Back then, it was like the people like Steve Taylor, who I just loved. He came up with the greatest song titles in the history of Christian music. He had a song back when we were really doing a lot on the abortion issue, called "I Blew Up the Clinic," and the whole purpose of the song was that it was a parody, but he was an ice cream man, and he thought abortion clinics were killing his business, so he was going to blow up clinics. And he would literally go on stage and throw ice cream into the crowd. It was just stupid. Right. He had songs like he'd have songs like one of my favorite song titles he ever had is "Since I Gave Up Hope, I Feel a Lot Better." And it was just like some of the stuff he used to talk, but the guy was real. He ended up being a movie producer and just a tremendous guy, just on fire for his faith. But he was trying to just jab people a little bit and trying to make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So they would talk about issues, but there really aren't people like that anymore. I mean, there's you have to conform, and you have to be of a certain ilk to be able to do that. And it's unfortunately a lot of the Christian music today. One thing I like about Christian music today is that, you know, I'm not the guy sitting on the front lawn going, "Oh, there's Christians today." You know? But I like the move towards worship. I really do. I mean, about 10 years ago, Christian music started moving more towards worship. I think Michael W. Smith was one of the first ones to do that and started really pushing the whole worship side. And I love the worship band. I like Hillsong. You know,
I have this interview is over. I'm not kidding.
I like Bethel music too, but
this interview is really over. I have to end. You know,
I like elevation worship. You know, I like all that stuff. You know, I like the worshipful stuff. And you know, it's I read an article the other day where they were talking about how churches need to boycott Bethel music, and I'm like, based on what? I mean, maybe you get an issue with the theology or whatever.
Well, I think that's what it is.
But my gosh, the music itself,
I get it.
It's pretty hard to like read anything into it. It's some really good stuff. There's a woman at Bethel named Amanda Cook, who's one of the most prolific and most awesome writers that ever, I think, in Christian music, and she's legit. But because she's associated with Bethel, people like. But I just think there's some fantastic music out there, and God uses all sorts of people.
You know, and that's true. I agree with that. And you know, my own story in a lot of ways. I wanted to read the Bible even before I was saved at 42 years of age. I was really curious because I was a big U2 fan. And I knew that Bono was always quoting scripture in his songs, and that made me curious. You know, but hey, you know, I mean, but still, I believe God used that music to, you know, plant seeds in me.
I got into Christian music in the late 80s, and back then there were a lot of these, are they Christian or not? They aren't Christian.
Yeah.
We're just like, are they Christian? YouTube was one of those. It's like, are they Christian? Did they really do Christian music? And there were a lot of secular artists at that point who were doing Christian albums.
Sure.
That was back when Bob Dylan had a Christian album, if you remember that. So everybody's like,
didn't Neil Diamond do Christmas albums and Barbra Streisand?
well, Kenny G did a Christmas album. I mean, come on. Even he laughs about it. If you ever hear an interview with Kenny G about his Christmas album, he's the first one to laugh about it. He says, my manager came to me and said, you need to do a Christmas album. And he said, I'm Jewish, right? I mean, but he did it. It's one of the best-selling Christmas albums of all time.
Yeah.
And you still hear it in the mall every Christmas.
Yeah.
Most people that still go to malls. But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, I mean, so we wanted to talk about, and we've been doing this in our Bible study. You mentioned that with a bunch of guys, which, I would encourage anybody. I think it's tough for guys, for men, to get into a group of fellowship together, to mentor one another, iron sharpens iron, and to truly be vulnerable with each other. And I think we found that in our group. A lot of times guys, they put up the wall and, we don't want to let down our guards. And I think we definitely have that. And, we share our struggles. We're all going through them. I go through my own, and you're going through a lot of change. And one of the things that we've been discussing lately from, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. We read a book supposedly by Dallas Willard called Life Without Lack. But this idea of living with contentment. And, I think we wanted to talk about that. And, you're making a big change, right? You're learning the hard way, not the hard way, but yeah, you're learning, right?
I have purposely stripped down my life to the point where I am the world's free agent. And, I had a very humbling discussion with a friend of mine at breakfast this morning, and he was talking about my plans and what are you doing? And I went into very, vivid detail on my plans for the next year. And then he just listened and didn't say a word. And then when I was done, said, so what does God want you to do? And I'm like, oh yeah, you really had to throw that out there, didn't you? So I said, well, that's all part of this process, is trying to strip myself down and listen to God. So I reached a point where I have accomplished everything in my life that I've ever wanted to accomplish from a work standpoint. I've been on television, I've been on radio, I've spoken in front of thousands of people, I've been on a #1 rated show, I've done all this great stuff, and I've had some great experiences, but my personal life has never followed suit, and it's always been about the me. And I give you an example of this where Dave Dravecky used to be a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. And I don't know if people remember what happened to Dave, but Dave was a cancer survivor, and he was expected not to ever play baseball again, and he survived his cancer and came out to a standing ovation. Dave was a devout Christian, owed everything to his faith, and came out to the mound, the standing ovation, pitched a shutout inning in the first inning. The place went nuts. Came out later in the game and blew his arm up. It just fell apart. In one pitch, you could hear his arm just disintegrate. You could hear the bones popping. It was done. So they took his arm. And so now he's a one-armed former baseball player.
Yeah.
And I remember having lunch with him, and I think it was he was speaking at I think Oakland Christian School. I think he was speaking at a fundraiser.
Okay.
And I had lunch with him, and we were talking, and he says, I asked him what the biggest adjustment's been for him. And I expected him to talk about the physical stuff, but no, but what he did is he took a baseball card out of his pocket, and he says, people ask me to sign. This is what I sign when I give to people who want my autograph or whatever. And he said, the problem is that everything on this card, my picture and all the statistics on the back, this is who I thought I was. And then when I lost baseball, I had to start all over again and figure out who Dave Dravecky is.
Yeah.
And I've kind of gone through that too. I've, the big joke. Remember when I left? I had a very popular show in Washington D.C. and I left after about 5 years to start a station in Houston, which I ended up getting fired at, and I ended up going back to D.C. and ended up working in public relations. And D.C. is one of those towns where if they can't leverage you or use you, you're not really significant to anyone there. So I came back and people would go, Mark, you're back in town. You're back on the air again. And I went, no, I'm doing public relations. And they're like, all right, good to see you. And they just keep so because you're on radio, people don't really know what you look like. So I'd be at parties or political events or whatever. And there's my buddy, Jack Hughes, out there. We would go to parties and he would literally just go up to people and I go, do you know who this guy is? And they go, no. He said, he used to be Mark Gilman. And it was like seriously, this is going to be your line while I'm here. But it was humbling, and it was kind of started. I mean, it just was my first taste of what life is like off the media, and you have to discover yourself. And because of my personal life has never worked out, and I've never, divorce sucks, and I don't wish that on my worst enemy. And I had an 18-year-old marriage that ended here in Detroit, and it was rough. It was 6 years ago, and I've been trying to figure myself out since then. What do I do now?
Yeah.
My kids are older now. So now I have the opportunity to kind of try and just go what I want to do what I feel I need to do. So one of the things I did was I've been going to Guatemala since 1992. I originally went with Compassion International. They were a sponsor on the radio show.
Yeah.
They sent me down there and I fell in love with Guatemala. So I've been going back, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. Then I started going longer time. The year after my divorce, I was down there 3 times. I probably spent 4 months down there in 2005.
Okay.
And I just kept, and then I go back for a little while, and then I went back. But then this year I decided I'm going to try and spend a little more time. So I went down for 2 months, and I found an apartment on Lake Atitlán, which is down near Panajachel, which is a good 2.5 hours south of southwest of Guatemala City. And I found an apartment on the lake by myself and just read and sat there. I read Life Without Lack, and I read Getting Your Life Back by John Eldredge.
Yeah.
Both books recommended by people in our Bible study.
Yep.
And the continuing thread between both of those books was, appreciate what's around you that you've abandoned because of social media, because of distractions, because of work, because of kids, whatever. Eldridge talks about how he could tell when he was having a bad day, even when he didn't know it. When he went out to go pet his horses, he'd go out pet his horses at lunch to get perspective, and he could tell by the way the horses reacted to him what kind of day he was having.
They knew. They knew.
They could feel it.
Yeah.
So, but the whole thing is, anybody's ever read John Eldredge's books, like
Wild at Heart.
Yeah, Wild at Heart. Take your kids hunting. But he's a big outdoors guy, and it's like take a walk in nature. Go look at God's creation. Go.
Yeah.
And Willard was. Oh, and he also talked about get off social media.
Yeah.
Just get off. Just don't put your phone away. I remember all these situations where I have been in the last few years in beautiful places and watching kids taking photos. Like somebody made a joke one time, I forgot who it was, about the people who go to concerts and they film their whole concerts on their phone. And I'm like, why are you there? I'm like, what are you who's going to watch this later, by the way? You're eating up all your space on your phone. And then a second, like, who's watching this thing? And everybody's got their phones up and everybody's looking at it on the phone. I'm like, can't you just watch the concert? I mean, can't you just
enjoy the moment for yeah.
But we've lost that. We've lost that. So I'm trying to so there's no more beautiful place than Lake Atitlán and Guatemala. And I'd walk for miles and miles and miles at lunch and in the morning and in the evening, just thinking and praying and contemplating what my next step was. And I kind of got this whole thing. It was like, I'm going to turn into a minimalist. I'm going to get rid of everything.
Yeah.
So I've sold my house. I've sold all my furniture. I had I had a beautiful Jeep, and I miss it. It was a Grand Cherokee Limited. It was a 2020. I love that car, and I actually talked the dealership into taking it back, and with some help from friends who were here, and I have nothing right now. I mean, I don't have a home. And my friends are like, you know what, Mark, you're living the life we all want to live. So if you're at home with 3 or 4 kids, you want my life right now. But it's not as cracked up to be. It's like just silly stuff like getting a driver's license. If you don't own a home, and I have bought and sold 5 homes in the last 6 years. So it's not like I don't know how to do this. Okay. Some of them are rental properties, some are whatever. And I just got rid of everything. So, but if you're trying to get a driver's license and you don't have a physical address, like right now, I'm in a house that I'm house sitting at. I have a friend in Florida with her boyfriend who just told me I could stay here for a few months. So I'm leaving for Guatemala again on Friday. Yeah. But it was like a great gift from her to let me do this. And I'm just very thankful. I mean, I spent Christmas in DC. I spent a day with my kids and then took off for DC for a couple of weeks, and they had their own thing going on. And I just decided I'm going to figure this out. So I rented a place in Guatemala City. I'm going to stay down there for as long as I can. The way things are set up with residency down there, you can only stay 90 days without paying a fine. The fine is steep. It's like $1.75 a day. Wow. And so I don't know how long I'm going to stay. I mean, I could stay the rest of the year for $500. I mean, I don't care. Wow. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to let God lead. But I have basically gotten rid of everything. God has taken this big fat eraser and wiped the board. Yeah. Do you have, I mean, you're going to have our group, obviously. The great thing about technology is we can still connect with you in Guatemala on Thursdays and whenever, actually. But do you have a faith group that you'll be able to fellowship with when you're down there? I mean, I think that's important. So I have a friend of mine that she is set on me going to her church, which is Iglesia de Gloria. It's a fantastic church. And but it's all in Spanish. Mi español es malo. I am not good with Spanish. You better learn it. So I'm working on it. But I said, I'm gonna understand about 10% of it. And she said, you'll get it. Because the immersion technique works or whatever. There is an English speaking fellowship down there that I'm going to get involved with, and so I'm looking forward to that too. Guatemala is a very Catholic country. And in Catholic, I mean, very ritualistic, very, they're much more strict down there about things. I mean, there was literally a line outside of every church in Guatemala on Ash Wednesday. I mean, you don't find those here. Yeah. Here you find lines to get punch keys, but you don't have lines for Ash Wednesday. So it was just, it's very traditionally Catholic down there. So I'm very fortunate that most of my friends down there are evangelical, and there's a very strong evangelical movement going through Guatemala, which has been really fun to watch. And you've never seen anything until, you've watched a church service down there where they sing Hillsong in Spanish. It's fun. There's a very strong Christian culture. Guatemala is interesting. The family is a very interesting thing down there because it's very, very difficult to get divorced down there, which you would think on the front would be a good thing. But what happens is that these women get cheated on and abused, and they can't do anything about it unless they can prove it. Yeah. So a lot of them never get divorced. So the guy always, no matter what he's done, always has a hand in things. They can't legally push them aside. And so it's a moral dilemma. I mean, did you spend the rest of your life married without any more relationships? Or it's hard. And then, stepdads move in, and in poor areas in Guatemala, and I've seen horrible things that happen with the stepdads, which just means mom's latest boyfriend, because they don't get married. Comes in and molests the children, and that happens a lot too. So there is a in Santiago, Guatemala, which is on the other side of Lake Atala. There is an incredible orphanage that I've raised money for in the past, and it's called Manos de Compasión, and Hands of Compassion. And It's run by a young woman from Wisconsin and a guy from Philadelphia who met when he was there on a mission trip. And they ended up running this whole organization. They've got 60 kids, all have been sexually abused, all have been given to them by the Guatemalan courts. They've got 2 airplanes. They go to Guatemala City. They pick up the kids from court. They bring them back down. And they take care of 60 kids on $200,000 a year. I don't know how the heck.
Wow.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, $120,000 a year. They take care of 60 kids. And it's just phenomenal what they do. But when you hear these stories, they have a girl that they adopted who's the stepfather tried to kill because the mom died and he didn't want to raise her. So he put her face in a fire, tried to burn her to the death, and left her there for 3 days. And she was already autistic, had some issues. And the neighbors found her 4 days later, and her body is scarred from head to toe. She got meningitis. She had, I don't know how many surgeries, but she's in a wheelchair and she just can't move. No. But this couple adopted her and they take her around in that wheelchair. She doesn't talk. She barely responds to anything. She's got a feeding tube. She's got, but they take her in this wheelchair everywhere they go. They go on vacation, she goes. If they go here, they go. They're just, these people are just amazing people.
Wow.
And, anybody listening to this podcast wants to help these folks out. I can't say enough good things. I've been there 3 times, and they built their own school. It's just incredible what this couple is. They're probably 30, maybe. It's amazing what they're doing down there. But I hear these stories all the time down in Guatemala, and it's just it's interesting. But I've been very excited to see this evangelical wave go through the country.
Well, maybe you're going to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'm thrilled.
Maybe that's God's plan for you, to go evangelize in Guatemala.
Evangelize, yeah. Like, my Spanish has got to get a lot better. But I'd rather help them. I work with a group down there called Mayan Families, which is it's an NGO that helps care the indigent Mayan population, and I handle their communications and help them with fundraising. We're doing a big branding project right now. It's a lot of fun. It's another organization run by an American from Colorado. And it's not a Christian organization, but they do some incredible work. And I'm very fortunate to be aligned with them. And I'm excited. I'm a free agent, and I'm very fortunate that the work I do, a lot of the work.
You're not a free agent. You belong to God. You're His agent. So,
well, I just say I can go. Yeah. I can go wherever He leads, because my work is remote, and I'm doing a ton of writing now, which I really enjoy.
You should write a book.
Yeah,
you got stories, man. You got stories.
I've started writing. Let me tell you what the book I'm going to write. It's called. I think I've told you about this, but it's called Life Without a Helmet, and and it's because I met a pastor in Tucson back in the 80s, and he went up to me one time and he said, "Mark, if God intended you to live your life the way you live it, He would have given you a helmet." And I never forgot that, and I just thought, you know what? My life has been life without a helmet. It has been very interesting.
That is awesome. You should do it.
Yeah, sorry, I got all serious on you here. Most too bad.
No, you didn't. When, today?
I'm kidding. No, I can't stay serious for 10 minutes. So earlier, I think that's one of the biggest things missing in Christian media, even conservative media. People got to laugh. One thing, I bashed Rush earlier, but one thing I loved about Rush is that he never took himself all that seriously. He had all this bravado, but it was all as a game, and it was Rush just self-effacing, and I can't be. There's a big difference between that and those that are on, and they're the beacons of truth. And anybody who considers themselves a beacon of truth is sadly misled. I don't think. I just laugh at everyone. Everything's not all dire. The politics in Washington or Lansing are not going to affect anything. We all need to be like the government in Guatemala and just be openly corrupt, and then we have no expectation.
Yeah. Well, I think we're pretty close to that. So,
but it's not open enough yet. There's no. It's like you have to be openly corrupt. I remember one time. Yeah. One time, a friend of mine in Bolivia said, we do things above the table that you guys do under the table. We're no different.
Hold our beer.
Hold my beer. Hold my bubbly.
Yeah. Well, thanks, brother. I appreciate you being on.